but everyone has a different story to tell. Shell, which says it's losing the
Tampa market. Staggering rise.
In Northeast Africa, precisely on the Horn of Africa.
the local market.
All right. Happy Sunday, everyone. Welcome you all. As you all know, this is Frank. I am your host. This is the Revolutionary Repatriation Educational Lecture Series every Sunday at 1 p.m. where we preach the real gospel. The gospel that we preach with our collecting offering or with our asking for taxes. All right. So this is Frank. Once again, I am your host. So today's topic, it says, Germany confirmed war in Europe is caused by NATO and not Russia. War in Europe is caused by NATO and not Russia. And we might be looking at other stuff as well. Welcome you all. Welcome, Dennis. Welcome, Mad, Huru. So as you come on, please share the live. Subscribe, like as well. And I just want to send my thanks and appreciation for you all being here, because I know some of you have other schedules, but you thought it wise to be here because this is the right place to be. Welcome, welcome, welcome. So before we start, I'm going to bring out, I think, 2 videos or 3 videos, and I'm going to use that as my premise. All right, and then we go ahead. So let me bring the first one out. The first one is about a story, a history. Okay, a history of our story. All right, that's the first one we're going to start with, and it says the untold story of slave farm. The untold story of slave farm. Welcome, Akata. The untold story of the slave farm. That's what we're going to start with. All right. The slave farm. Do we still have slave farm today? Yes. Slave farm is still going on. In fact, matter of fact, Africa is still being used as slave farm. Matter of fact, Black people in the diaspora are still being used as slave and slave farm. The prison system is one of them, the slave farm. All right. So, and apart from this, the prison system, during the time of slavery, African people couldn't speak, right? During the time of this 21st century, African people cannot still speak, right? All right. So the untold story of a slave farm. Bear with me. We're going to get into the topic, okay, of why Germany confirmed or whatsoever the situation may be. But let's get into it. So I'm just going to bring it out. If that's not it, I'm going to cancel it. Okay, this is not it. All right, let me go to the first one here. No, let's go with this. All right, so this is it. So we are going to play. So we're going to start with that. Welcome, Nkrumah.
Black slaves they would otherwise be subjected to. Many of the white slave owners felt they were doing their females.
Sorry that I have to mute it to come back, unmute myself. Now, the reason why I'm bringing this video out is to remind you of what happened in the Berlin Conference. All right, it just happened again. The Berlin Conference has just been rebirthed. All right, the NATO summit like they just had. All right, so that's the rebirth of the Berlin Conference. This is a Revolutionary Repatriation educational lecture series. All right, so the Berlin Conference has just been rebirthed. All right, the NATO summit they just had. All right, that's just the Berlin Conference have been rebirthed. So that's the reason why I'm bringing this out. So I want you to pay close attention as we go on along. All right, now.
Slaves a favor when they... Many of the white slave owners felt they were doing their female slaves a favor when they mated with them, granting them a respite from the brutish black slaves they would otherwise be subjected to. Generally speaking, it was the house slaves that got raped the most.
Please do us a favor by sharing this video.
Nobody talks about the 13-year-old girl on a breeding farm, forced to bear as many children as possible, only to have them ripped away and sent down south to endure a lifetime of hardship without a mother. Slave owners often bred their slaves to produce more workers. The function of such breeding farms was to produce as many slaves as possible for the sale and distribution throughout the...
Now, as we go along, I want you to pay attention to certain words that are being used here. Breeding farm, right? Breeding farm. Now, it's still happening today. Africa is still being used as a breeding ground for Europe and America to extract the resources, right? And then Africa in the diaspora, they are still being used as breeding farm, right? That is, they may not be having sex with them, born by them, and taking the baby on the slave plantation, right? But they are still being used in favor of the oppressor, right? The children of the colonizer, right? Okay? Now, they are still being used, right? Because you have Black people who are still carrying on the meshes, the ideology of the oppressor, right? The descendant of the enslaver, right? To make sure what they put in place, a hold, right? Now, pay attention as well. Let me make another distinction. When you have your child, right? You have your child and you have a mechanic shop. And that mechanic shop bring in money or bring in finances that support the family. Now, when you have your children, what do? When you have especially a male child, right? You pass on that legacy to that male child to continue that business, right? Now, even the farm, those that have farm, they pass on the legacy of that farm to the children, to their children. They start teaching them how to farm, how to maintain a farm, right? Now, if you have a business, you pass that business on to your children. You start teaching them how to maintain that business, you know, teaching them about economy, about finances, and so forth, right? That's what happened. Whatsoever happened in the past against Black people, it was passed on to the children of the oppressor to maintain a business. So it's business. So when you see some of the things we're going to see here today, it was passed on to the children of the oppressor. Today, we see them. It was passed on to them. So what we see happening today, it is not by coincidence. It was passed on to them. It's business that was passed on to them. So it's business as usual. It was business yesterday. It is still business today. So pay attention.
South. In this video, we discuss the sad truth about American slave breeding farms. By the 1820s, planters and would-be planters were moving in large numbers to places previously unavailable for settlement, and growing the fiber for sale in Europe and New England, where a textile industry was beginning to thrive. The extension of the so-called Cotton Kingdom required new laborers. As of 1808, when Congress ended the nation's participation in the international slave trade, planters could no longer import additional slaves from Africa or the West Indies. The only practical way of increasing the number of slave laborers was through new births. With so much at stake, Black women's reproductive role became politically, as well as economically, decisive. If enslaved mothers did not bear sufficient numbers of children to take the place of aged and dying workers, the South could not continue as a slave society. From many trusted history sources, it's made to appear that America had little choice but to increase slave production to offset the altruistic end of the international slave trade, which Congress banned in 1808. Thomas Jefferson was president at the time. He had no problem with slavery. He literally loved his slaves, failing to free even Sally Hemings, who bore him 6 children, 4 of whom lived to be adults. Jefferson was a Virginia farmer, knowing full well the value of slavery to the Southern economy. Congress at that time was controlled by the party he created, the Democratic Republican Party. They didn't end the international slave trade to harm slavery, but to preserve it, domestic slavery, in particular. Congress wanted to decrease the external supply to keep prices up for the homebred slaves. Americans did not take up breeding slaves in response to congressional action. That action was taken at the behest of slave breeders as a protectionist means to keep the price of their product up. Jefferson's home state Virginia was the leading producer of slaves. Slavery eventually exceeded tobacco as their leading export. Maryland was second in slave production, followed by several other states. Economist Richard Such did a study which found that in 1860, on farms with at least 1 female slave, the ratio of women to men was 2 to 1. In Virginia, female slaves exceeded males by over 300,000. They were used to breed. Robert Lumpkin ran what is mostly referred to as a slave jail, with little recognition that he ran the nation's largest breeding farm. He personally had 5 children with a slave Mary, who he ultimately remembered in his will. While owners of the breeding farms and plantations, in general, fornicated at will with their property, they also utilized selective breeding, maintaining their own large bucks and importing large male slaves for the purpose of breeding good workers for the field.
Now, before we continue, right, let me make something clear here as well what he said. Now, the picture, let me go back so that you can see the picture as I speak about it. All right, so let me go back. Okay, good. All right, so that's the picture right there. Right now, let me speak about this picture a little bit. This is why, as a revolutionary, when we speak, we make people uncomfortable. Yes, we are here to make people uncomfortable as long as we are speaking the truth. And that is why they don't want for history to be taught. Now, most of the time, I always go on the African leaders. And most of the time, I always go on the African writers and the African reporters. And some of the time as well, people who speak, I think that they are speaking for Black people, but they don't understand. Right? Now, during the time of slavery, white people, white slave owner, having a sexual intercourse with a Black female or with an African was not in good faith. It was never in good faith. It was never by love. But yet they stay, they make love to that female. They kiss her. They make romantic love. But it was never love. We experience that today. We still see white supremacy, people like Joe Biden rolling arms with Black people, and we think it is out of love, and we think it is out of unity, and we think it is global, how they call it, globalism, right? No. Because they have an agenda. Their agenda during slavery, their agenda of having an affair with an African woman, it was not because they loved her. It was because they wanted more slaves. They wanted more labor force on the plantation. Imagine your own offspring. You enslave your own offspring. How inhumane, how dirty, how devilly people can be. You enslave your own offspring only because that offspring came out to be black, because you lied down with a black woman. And the baby, your offspring, came out to be black. And you hated that child because of the color of the skin. You hated that child. And you make that child a slave to work on the plantation. You're black, but just because that person have a black skin. They make love to African women. It was never out of love. So if they are inviting you into our organization, if they are giving you position, it is not out of love, because they want to use you for a purpose. They use our African mothers, our sisters, for a purpose of breeding plantation. At that time, in which, of course, it is today's state, just because you are rolling hand with Joe Biden, with George Bush, it is not in good faith. It is in bad faith against you. They make love to our sister, you see it. But it was not because they wanted to make love to them, to have baby by them, to raise family. And it's still happening today. We have some of them that are beyond our brother. Not because of family, but because of capital, because of wealth, because they want to get money, they want to claim property. It is still happening today. We have our brothers and sisters in the NBA, in the football, in their career, in their musical career, in the entertainment. You see it. Once they get that money, they put some false allegation against you. And of course, you know, they got it, the prison system or the court system, they have it. It is still happening. They are still making love to us, but it is not out of love. It is because of capital. It is because of economic reason. It was because of economic reason, then they did it. And today, it is still because of economic reason. Pay attention.
Utilize selective breeding, maintaining their own large bucks and importing large male slaves for the purpose of breeding good workers for the fields. Black female slaves were some of the first people in the country to receive free health care. Breeders took a great interest in fertility.
Now, was free health care in good faith? No, it was never in good faith. Now, I have said this before, and I'm going to say it again. Adam Smith, the man to whom they call as the father of economics, he brought that system in. He told the slave master, treat your slave as you treat your cattle. The same way you give medical attention to your cattle, the same way you give water to your cattle, the same way you give food to your cattle, treat your slave like that. So that you can have more products. So that you can have more, so that you can have productive slave. Do not keep the slave hungry. When a slave is hungry, the slave will die. You will lose income, you will lose capital. And product will become low. Let your slave be hefty like your cattle. So by their giving, why would they want to give medical attention only to the female and not to the male? It is because they want for the female to be hefty so that they can born a hefty baby, to be strong enough so that they can have limited time to walk, to crawl, to walk and grow faster. When the mother is hefty, you have a hefty baby, not a deformed baby. And our baby will be what to be healthy to go on a plantation. It was never in good faith. Pay attention. Some of you leaders, African leaders, whether on a continent or in America or in Europe, you receive medical attention like this. And those medical attention you receive is by getting white attention, white validation, small crumbs. These are the medical attention you receive these days. And you forgo the struggle. You forgo the struggle of your people. The masses of your people that are struggling, you forgo them because you receive medical attention. Let's continue.
And expected multiple births from the women, or their value would be diminished. Home medical journals were produced to help with difficult births that had previously been left to the slaves to deal with. Many films have depicted boats arriving in New Orleans, which became the largest slave market in the antebellum South. Rarely is it shown those ships originated in Richmond and Baltimore. Slaves were also shipped by railroad, packed in boxcars, or sent by stagecoach. The slave breeding farms are mostly left out of the history books except for those that deny their existence. Many of the white slave owners felt they were doing their female slaves a favor when they mated with them, granting them a respite from the brutish black slaves they would otherwise be subjected to. Generally speaking, it was the house slaves that got raped the most. Some mothers had to.
We are still experiencing this today. When the white man does something for the black man, they feel they are doing a favor for the black man. When they give a position to the black man, to the black woman to become the chief executive officer or manager or whatsoever to the World Trade Center, they feel they are doing a favor. When they made a black man a secretary general for the UN, they felt that they were doing a favor. Pay attention to what we are going to discuss today. Pay attention to what we are going to discuss today. I started by saying, if you have a farm and you have your children, you pass on that legacy to your children so that your children can maintain that farm, so that the financial, growth will stay within the family. And that was what passed on to their children. And their children are still maintaining the plantation, the farm, the system. It is still being maintained. The NATO summit they just had, it is the rebirth of the NATO. Or the Berlin conference, let's say. It is the rebirth. Pay attention to what we are watching and what we are going to see today. This is the Revolutionary Repatriation Educational Lecture Series, where we make things comfortable for people and we don't care.
To protect their offspring from the master's wife if she had reason to believe her spouse was the father. States such as Virginia produced slaves as their main domestic crop. The price of slaves was anchored by industry in other states that consumed slaves in the production of rice and sugar, and constant territorial expansion. As long as the slave power continued to grow, breeders could literally bank on future demand and increasing prices. That made slaves not just a commodity, but the closest thing to money that white breeders had. It's hard to quantify just how valuable people were as commodities, but the sublets try to convey it. By a conservative estimate, in 1860 the total value of American slaves was $4 billion, far more than the gold and silver then circulating nationally. Slaves were worth more than everything else they could imagine combined. Because slaves were property, Southern slave owners could mortgage them to banks, and then the banks could package the mortgages into bonds and sell the bonds to anyone anywhere in the world, even where slavery was illegal.
Now you understand where mortgage came from, mortgages. You understand where it came from now, right? Slavery is still going on. You have your house, right? You understand where mortgage came from?
In the 1830s, powerful Southern slave owners wanted to import capital into their states so they could buy more slaves. They came up with a new, two-part idea, mortgaging slaves, and then turning the mortgages into bonds that could be marketed all over the world. First, American planters organized new banks, usually in new states like Mississippi and Louisiana. Drawing up lists of slaves for collateral, the planters then mortgaged them to the banks they had created, enabling themselves to buy additional slaves to expand cotton production. To provide capital for those loans, the banks sold bonds to investors from around the globe: London, New York, Amsterdam, Paris. The bond buyers, many of whom lived in countries where slavery was illegal, didn't own individual slaves. Bonds backed by their value. Planters' mortgage payments paid the interest and the principal on these bond payments. As historian Edward Baptist reveals, slavery and its expansion were central to the evolution and modernization of the United States in the 18th and 19th centuries, catapulting the US into a modern, industrial, and capitalist economy. In the span of a single lifetime, the South grew from a narrow coastal strip of worn-out tobacco plantations to a subcontinental cotton empire. By 1861, it had 5 times as many slaves as it had during the Revolution, and was producing 2 billion pounds of cotton a year. It was through slavery and slavery alone that the United States achieved a virtual monopoly on the production of cotton, the key raw material of the Industrial Revolution, and was transformed into a global power rivaled only by England. Several factors coalesced to make the breeding of slaves a common practice by the end of the 18th century, chief among them the enactment of laws and
All right, folks, I want to make a quick comment here. Now, just from watching this video, we're going to end it, right? Just from watching this video, who are the founding father of America? Is it Thomas Jefferson? Who made America the way it is? Sometimes the wise man usually says, ones who have the power and the knowledge, not just the power, but the power, both the power and the knowledge, have the ability to rewrite history. Who are the founding father of America? Is it Thomas Jefferson, George Washington? Absolutely not. Just how they lied to us and they told us Christopher Columbus discovered America, and we went with that narrative for so long until we began to get the power and the knowledge to rewrite history, to interpret history, to fit the correct narrative and the perspective. Before we came to understand that Christopher Columbus did not discover America. In that scenario, those people, Thomas Jefferson or George Washington, and the list goes on, they were never the founding father of America. Black people that were enslaved, they were the founding father of America. They funded America. They gave the economy of America. They gave the power of America. Black struggle is the founding father of America. Those that were enslaved, that labor, they were the founding father of America. They made America the way it is, that everyone wants to come to live, to visit, to see how it is. Not Thomas Jefferson, the one that owned slaves and that refused to free the slave. The one that lied down with slaves and had children by them. Just because you went and wrote something in a book and said, this is our independence, that does not make it a founding father. That does not make it in any way that you make this country like this. Oh yes, there are many countries around the world where people went and said, today we gain independence, today we declare independence, today we gain freedom, but yet and still nobody want to go to those countries. If we are to go by the interpretation, the real judgment, Black people are the founding father because they are the backbone of this country. African people are the backbone of this country. They are the funder. They labor for this country. They build this country. Those that build a place are the founding father of that place. Now Christopher Columbus, who came, killed people, tortured people, raped them, drove them out of the land, and then became a founding father. No, you that struggle for that land, you that labor and till the soil, you are the founding father. Henceforth, Black people are the founding father. African people are the founding father and the founding mother of this country. The way you want to take it, you can take it. That's your business. But they are the founding father and the founding mother. The rest of the people who came and stood there and read paper, they stole that glory. They stole that legacy. Because their blood did not waste. Their sweat did not waste. The people to whom their sweat and blood wasted on this land are the founding father of this land, are the founding mother of this land. Now people who came to claim the glory because they read some piece of paper. Let's continue.
Practices that transformed the view of slaves from personhood into thinghood. In this way, slaves could be bought and sold as chattel without presenting a challenge to the religious beliefs and social mores of the society at large. All rights were to the owner of the slave, with the slave having no rights of self-determination either to his or her own person, spouse, or children. Slaveholders began to think that slavery was grounded in the Bible. This view was inspired in part by an interpretation of the Genesis passage, and he said, "Cursed be Canaan, a servant of servants shall he be unto his brethren." Ham, son of Noah and father of Canaan, was deemed the antediluvian progenitor of the African people. Some whites used the Bible to justify the economic use of slave labor. The subjugation of slaves was taken as a natural right of the white slave owners. The second-class position of the slave was not limited to his relationship with the slave master, but was to be in relation to all whites. Slaves were considered subject to white persons. America scarcely acknowledges the existence of breeding farms, let alone documents their contribution to the early South's flourishing economy. There are self-evident truths described in the Declaration of Independence, and truths so vile that they must be concealed and ignored at all costs. The second group includes breeding farms. History books, when they mention it at all, claim that slave breeding did not begin until after the Atlantic slave trade was prohibited. In reality, it began decades earlier on plantations and farms, and it was only because America was able to produce the slaves it required that the importation of slaves from Africa was stopped.
$1 million. So the reason you need to keep me in a job, the reason you need to
All right. That's the first video. We're going to connect the dots. Because the issues of Black people, of African people, when it comes to Europe, when it comes to the European war, when it comes to North America, is a puzzle. In order to understand the attitude, the current attitude of Europe and America, you have to put puzzle together to understand their attitude. Let's go to the next video. thought I had it here. Let me see. All right, this is not it. I had to bring it. All right, bear with me, folks. I got it right here. So I got to take the other one up because that's not it. So let me see here. All right, let me see. All right.
We have seen what happens to black people, and we have seen the systemic way in which all these are articulated and executed. Even when one begins to talk about the discontent, it must be given a historical context. Discontent is brewed when there is discrimination and injustice. And you can see it even when you trace the history of Europe and even outside of Europe. If you look at the Young Turks Revolution in Turkey in 1908, the Bolshevik Revolution in 1917, the French Revolution itself in the early days, the revolutions in France and the riots in France in 1958, the riots in 1968, the Tiananmen Square in 1980, the South Korean riots, the Sharpeville Massacre in 1966, the Soweto massacres in 1976, and one can go on. And then you can see what is now happening in France, the riots which have been ignited by that senseless killing by a police officer of a young 17-year-old who was not resisting. Footages now demonstrate. It tells you that there was a volcano. And in the case of France, that volcano has been there for a long time. There have been migrants to France. If you go to cities such as Marseille, you will be surprised at the population of Moroccans, Aboriginal Moroccans and Algerians who are there. If you are in Paris and Nantes and Lyon, you'll be surprised at the number of Africans who have migrated to France and who are now French citizens. Yet the French system is a system that is still controlled by a few racist Caucasians who run the political machine and who have created a policing system that is inclined towards dealing with non-indigents to mean Caucasians on the basis that they are guilty until they prove themselves innocent. As long as that is the culture that dominates in France, then the riots are just about the logical outcome of it. For 5 days on, the country cannot operate. Of course, it pains one when individuals' properties are destroyed through looting and all, but it is the language, rioting is the language of the unheard. If you have been speaking loudly for a long time, then violence becomes the language of the unheard. And it is a lesson to France. In fact, this is unfair to say, but I'll say it. For France, the chicken are coming home to roost. They are now being reminded of what they did to Guinea in 1958. They are being reminded of what they did to Algeria. They are being reminded of what they did in Indonesia and other parts of the world. I hope that this very painful lesson is going to send a clear message to the French administration that the time is now to accept and acknowledge that the injustices that are inbuilt in the French system will be dealt with and dealt with satisfactorily with people participation. And it's also a warning to other countries in Europe. Spain had better look. Portugal had better be on the lookout. Italy had better be on the lookout. Greece had better be on the lookout. It is a message that is being sent to Europe. If you don't style up and you don't treat other human beings like human beings and you call them animals, then with due respect to animals, they'll behave like animals.
Heavy points you bringing out, how many of y'all ready for the Third World War?
That's the second video we just watched. And he gave some historical perspective, right? And he said, enough is enough, right? And he said, the time has come, right? Now, do you see what is going around today? Like we said, the NATO summit they just had is the rebirth of the 1884 Brethren Conference. Do you know why they have that NATO summit? Again, the reason why it is a rebirth, there was no African in there. There was no African in there. But guess what? They also said they had their summit to fight for Africa. How are you going to have a summit in regards to fighting for Africa and for African people, and you have no African representation? How can that be? They had this summit. Part of the reason of the summit was they went to discuss, to fight for African, to stand up for Europe and America, to stand up for African. Since when have Europe and America stand up for Africans? Since when? Don't tell me America have been there for Africa. Don't tell me that. Don't tell me Europe have been there for Africa. Don't tell me that. That is why I played the first video. And I said, during the time of slavery, slave owner, white people, had sexual intercourse with black female, with African female, with African woman. Was it a love? Was it out of love? Was it romantic? They had romantic relationship with Africans. They kissed them, they play with them, but was it love? Or it was because of different intention. So don't tell me America have been there for Africans. Don't tell me that. We know what love is. We know when somebody is there for you or have been there for you, we know how it feels. We feel it, we touch it. We know it. We know who have been there for us, and we know who have never been there for us. Do you know why they had that NATO summit? It is because, like what Peter Olumumba said, enough is enough. The chicken are coming home to root now. We have come to realize that Spain, Portugal, Europe, the entire Europe, the North America, that they call the US, the Canada, we have come to understand their game. We have come to understand they have never been there for us. And because we are standing strong and tall and vigilant, that is why they said they have to rebrand. They have to bounce back. Don't believe me. We will show President Biden speaking about it again. We showed a video last week, but we did not catch it. But I was able to catch it. And I'm bringing it back. Where Joe Biden spoke and said, we have to rebrand. I'm just going to paraphrase it. We have to rebrand. We have to find a way. And Joe Biden said, if we don't find a way, the situation Africa is in, we are going to be in a situation. He said it by saying the reverse. If somebody tell you, if we don't work hard, the reverse of it is going to come on us. What does that mean? If they don't fight hard, if Africa runs or the position Africa is in, Europe and America will be in that position. That's what Joe Biden said. He said the reverse of it, you know it. Let's see the next video before we can get to the real topic. Let's see what Malcolm X told us. Now, I'm bringing this video in sequence because I want you to understand something as we go on, because I'm going to be making references to these 3 videos. Now, let's see what Malcolm X told us.
They used to have a saying that one doesn't have a Chinaman's chance, but they don't say that anymore. They use that expression back when China was weak. But now since Mao Zedong has been successful in making China a strong country, the Chinese have more chance than anybody else. So this saying has become outdated. Well, just as it took a strong China to give a Chinese person respect wherever that Chinese person is found on this earth, when we get a strong Africa, the person of African origin or African ancestry will be respected any place on this earth, even in America. But he will not be respected in America until Africa is strong, just as the Chinaman wasn't respected abroad until China became strong. They used to have a saying that one doesn't have a Chinaman's chance.
Now, somebody may ask and say, Frank, why did you bring out these videos instead of you getting to the topic? I brought out these 3 videos so that you can see. Now, listen to how history started. Now, I brought this video out, right, so that you can see how we lose or how we lost our humanity. That's number 1. Number 2, how are we going to gain our humanity? Number 3, how are we going to maintain? Now, the first one, the first video that we watch, how we lost it. Well, today we are the least in society when we were the first. But we are the least today. We are the bottom. But yet they stay. We are the most valuable creature on the face of the planet. The most valuable continent on the face of the earth, the world. But how come we lost it? We lost it because from the day we allowed the white man to enslave us, we lost it. We lost it because from the day we allowed the white man to colonize us, we lost it. We lost it because from the day we allowed them to interpret our spirituality, we lost it. We lost it because from the day we allowed them, we agreed to them that our practices, our culture, our identity, our heritage were primitive. And there was the supremacist. We lost it. And when we lost it, we became subspecies to them. We became subject to them. Now, why are you seeing them? That's the second stage, and that's what P.A. Olumoba talked about. Why are you seeing them frightened, scared, murmuring among themselves, calling among themselves, calling those European nations along with America, that if we don't come together, these people, they are waking up. Their unity means defeat to us. Their knowledge means defeat to us. Oh yes, you can see what is going on around the world today. You can see what is going on in Europe. Do you think it was just by that 17-year-old boy? That might have been the key that unlocked the door. But the tension was already there. Why do you think when things happen, when black people began to speak, and they say they use one instance? But no, it is because of something that has been building up. And once something pop, boom, we come out. And that's what happening today in Europe. Have you seen the tension? It's not just in France. They have gone to other European nations. Because they are no longer receiving from Africa the way they receive it. They are no longer exploiting the African continent the way they did it. Even in the diaspora, even in America, the way in which they used to exploit African people, they are no longer doing it. So things are becoming harder. African people are now holding fast to their money, to their finances. They are not spending again. They are spending it wisely. So things are becoming tough and hard. That's the second aspect. Our unity. Our knowledge should be used wisely. Now, what is the third aspect that Malcolm has talked about? He said the Chinese were once, racism was once against them, but they were able to beat that racism. They were able to conquer that colonization. And look at the Chinese today. They were once disrespected. They were once spit on. There was one knee on their neck. But where are the Chinese today? Even the colonizers are running behind the Chinese, begging, apologizing to the Chinese. Oh yes, one of the Kennedy, he tried to use his family lineage by going to China. I think it is today or last week, after Janet Yellen went and she did not succeed. One of the Kennedy went there to meet Xi Jinping in Beijing. Why are they respecting China today? They are running behind China. They are begging China. They are apologizing to China. They are appealing to China. Why it is today? A nation that they disrespected. A nation that they colonized yesterday. A nation that they stepped on them. They call their names. Malcolm X is asking us why today they are respecting China. He said, why today the Chinese are all over Europe, but they are respected. The Chinese are all over in America, but they are respected. It is because of back home in their home. It is because of back home in their home. So if the white man or the black man, if the black man is supposed to be respected, it is the African continent. It has to be built. It has to be independent. Not dependent on America or Europe. It has to be independent. It has to create that atmosphere for its citizens. It has to be able to tell the United States the truth, just how China it is today. We have to build ourselves in every capacity. Then we will be respected. Then African everywhere will be respected. You can see it just recently. You can see it just recently. We are not even yet there. We have not even, like, we have done nothing yet. But the little that we are doing, you can see how the West, they are shaking. America is shaking. Alone, we have colonial ally. Some level of respect have come. And that is what Malcolm X was talking about. We don't have to do business with them. Now that you have gotten it, let's get to what we are here for. Everything that you are just saying here, it is to remind us how history has been. Nothing have changed. Nothing have changed. The people that are in position of power today in America or in Europe, they were trained by those who came after them. And the message has just been passed on to them. So they are maintaining their financial status. They are maintaining their business, or those businesses that were set up by their forefather. They are maintaining it. That is what Adam Smith said. Love the slave like the way you love your cattle. Treat them the way you treat your cattle. Cater to them, give them good medical help, give them medical facility, let them be healthy. But was it good fit? No. So we are not slaves. You can keep your facility because it is not, you're not bringing it to us in good faith. So keep it. We don't need it. Now let's get to Joe Biden's statement, and then we wrap it up there, and then we see some few things, and then we go to, Germany issue. Okay. Now, we showed a video last week where Joe Biden spoke, right? We never get it, but we're going to get it today. So we're going to go to the end. Let me pull it out and see what Joe Biden says. So we can see it, and then we're going to build on it. Joe Biden is an extremist. They said Malcolm X was an extremist. No, Malcolm X was not. Joe Biden is an extremist. If we want to compare it, where they say Nelson Mandela was a terrorist, I think Joe Biden should be one. I think so. Where they said Dr. King was a terrorist, I think Joe Biden should be one. I think so. Because the things that Joe Biden says, Malcolm X did not say it. If Malcolm X, if things were to be found that the way we think we want it, I don't think Malcolm X was going to be that way. The thing that Joe Biden says, Dr. King did not say it. Instead, they call him a terrorist. So I think Joe Biden should be on our list. I think so. Let's see what he said before we go ahead.
That's what the president and I plan to deliver.
It's not just our citizens. Look, the global south, there are going to be 1 billion people in Africa very shortly. 1 billion. At the G7, it was originally called Build Back Better World, but we're talking about there's a new PPI, anyway, an industrial policy that we're all signed on to.
Now, we watched this video, last week. So I'm going to take it bit by bit, right? So that you can get it. Now, from the past video we just watched, right? where white farmers were having sexual intercourse with African people. And they have, most of them have African female in their houses for breeding purposes, right? What Joe Biden said in this video, he says what? He talked about the population of Africa that is maybe $1 billion, right? I mean, not $1 billion, but 1 billion people. Now, is President Joe Biden speaking in good faith of African people? No. Now, what he said, when they had a G summit, it was called Build Back, New World, as I'll paraphrase it, Build Back, New World, right? Now, there was something he wanted to say, but he's on the war stage. And he said, anyway, that's how I was, because there was something said in there, he don't want to bring it out if he continued to go. There was something said in there against African people in the African continent. He didn't want to bring it out, but he said, it was once said in the G7 summit, build back a new world anyway, and then he went ahead to speak. Now, build back new world. What he meant was they should find a strategy. They have to strategize to see how they can depopulate Africa or the African continent so that Africa can have that billion. They have to strategize to see so that Africa will not be knowledgeable. They have to re-strategize in order to maintain their hegemony. Listen to why. Let's continue here.
To provide the countries in Africa and in the global South an opportunity to grow, significantly grow, which benefits the United States, benefits Europe, benefits every country.
Now, that's part of the strategy, right? But is it true? Is it true that they're going to give opportunity to Africa for Africa to grow? Is that true? I will tell you no, because at that time, China never had influence on the African continent. Joe Biden, the forefather of Joe Biden, those that came before him, those that ruled before him, those that he succeeded, they had the African continent, they had the opportunity. In fact, those that Joe Biden succeeded, those people came, they told us about sustainable development. Did we have sustainable development? Those people came, they told us about modern technology. Did they give up modern technology? They came, they told us about one war. Did they give up one war? They came, they told us about mutual benefit. Did they give up mutual benefit? They came, they told us about building Africa. Did they build Africa? Did they help us to build Africa? So those are just words that he spoke. Now, what he meant was we have to re-strategize so that even if we get some phase or level of development to the African continent, we cannot and we should not allow them to take power into their hands. Let power be in the hands of the white people, in the hands of America and Europe. That is what Joe Biden was talking about here. We cannot give them power. They cannot be self-reliant. Power should still lie in our hands so that we can control them. That is what Joe Biden was talking about. Because Joe Biden and his descendant, or his forefather, they are all liars. Let's continue here.
Because the reverse is true. If we don't figure a way in which these countries can grow and participate.
Now you heard it. The reverse, because if we don't figure out a way, the reverse is true. That's what he said. The reverse, if we don't figure out a way, the reverse is true. We will become the third world country, and the third world country or continent will become the powerhouse of the world. Now we have to run to them. We have to leave our home. We have to leave the nation we call our nation and run to them. The reverse. Who are running to come to America? Who are the people running? Now I'm just focusing on Africa, whether people come from Europe or so whatsoever. But I'm focusing on African people, on Africa. Who are the people running coming here? Joe Biden said the reverse. The reverse. Let me put it back so that you can see it. So he's saying the only way we will not reverse, the table will not flip, is now the model of China, where China is carrying on development. That's why they love China, but he don't want to say it. But Joe Biden is actually saying the reason why Africans love China is because China is empowering them. China is making them self-reliant, self-determined, independent. So we have to strategize. We have to find a way, even as we go there to make development, okay? Even as we go there to improve the educational system, it should still be a system that we will give them. We should still maintain the mind. They should not maintain the diamond mine. We should maintain the diamond mine. We should maintain the uranium. We should maintain the gold, the timber. We should maintain the ocean body. We should maintain everything. Even as we give them some development, even as we improve their life, we should maintain it. We cannot allow them to maintain it to become self-reliance. So we have to strategize, because the reverse, if Africa becomes self-reliant and self-determined continent, the reverse, that was a, let me go by again so that you can see it. We're going to, be with me. We're getting to the point where Germany said XYZ. But we are laying it here. We want you to understand things here.
And to deliver.
It's not just our citizens. Look, the global south, there are going to be 1 billion people in Africa very shortly. 1 billion. At the G7, it was originally called Build Back Better World, but we're talking about there's a new PPI. Anyway.
You heard it, right? At the G7, it was called Build Back Better World. Now, in our G7, the meeting they had about Build Back Better World. Did they build Africa? Did they build a better world? No, they never built a better world. What they said in our G7 at that time was about to destroy Africa. Proxy war, destabilization. That's the Build Back Better world I was talking about. Because the more Africa becomes destabilized, the more prosperous Europe becomes. So you saw he talking about at the G7, it was called Build Back Better world anyway, and then he skipped it because there was something he was going to say down there. But let's continue here to where he talked about the reverse. If they don't work over time, the reverse, Europe will become like Africa or the third world country or America. That's what he said. So watch it.
An industrial policy that we're all signed on to provide the countries in Africa and in the global south an opportunity to grow, significantly grow, which benefits the United States, benefits Europe, benefits every country. because the reverse is true. If we don't figure a way in which these countries can grow and participate and have to and be able to build.
All right, now you heard it clear. I'm going to take it from there. But you heard it, he said, we have to figure out a way, right, to have an industrial policy. As we all know, the policy of the U.S. on the African continent is always toxic. So Joe Biden is standing here saying we have to figure out a way to build an industrial policy. And you heard what he said. Because if not, the reverse, if we don't do it, if we don't figure out a way to build an industrial policy, the reverse of it. Now, why did they come up with such a statement? It is because of China. So if they know China is doing the right thing on the African continent, why can't they work along with China? Why they can't work with the policy of China? But no, they are saying the policy of China is bad because specifically the policy of China is going to make Africa self-reliant, self-determined, independent. And that is why they don't want. That is why Joe Biden don't want. He said they have to come out or create an industrial policy. Now, that industrial policy, it means they will do some development like how China is doing it. But the development will be constrained. Now, before them, they gave money, they gave finances to African leaders, but there was no development. But those finances, it constrained African leaders. So it is that same policy they want to come with. They will do development, but those development will constrain you where the United States and ally Europe, they will still control you. They will still control your resources. And in fact, in the same recording, back down, Joe Biden said, any nation that does not adhere to their interests, that nation will never benefit from American technology. And those are some of the things that they want to discuss in the NATO summit they just had. And Joe Biden said it in this video. The video is there, but it's long. But let's go ahead. We're going to take this video down. Now, you are seeing what Joe Biden said, right? They want to build an industrial policy. And that policy will maintain and control African people, even though they may give some developmental facelift, right? That's what they want to discuss down there, and that's what they are discussing. Now, they're going to be making phone calls to one another until September for the UN summit, putting ideas together. All right? But my question here, maybe I may not get to it. African leaders, you are seeing what a European and Americans are coming together, making NATOs, right? Having a summit. You are not there. And all these summit is against Africa. What is Africa doing? We keep asking, right? Now, let's get to Germany.
Second Dr. has been a member of the German Bundestag for nearly 20 years. She's the chairwoman of the parliamentary group of Die Linke in the Committee on Foreign Affairs of the German Bundestag and spokeswoman for international relations and disarmament of the parliamentary group of Die Linke. She is a member of the NATO Parliamentary Assembly and a substitute member of the Parliamentary Assembly of the Council of Europe, deputy chairwoman of the German-Chinese Parliamentary Friendship Group, German-Indian Parliamentary Friendship Group, and German-US Parliamentary Friendship Group. So she can get on with pretty much everyone by the sound of things. But she's amazing. I've spoken with her in London and we're so happy that she's taken the time out to join us here today.
Thank you so much, Claire, dear Mick, dear friends. Thanks for having me here. Thanks for this event. The war in Ukraine is claiming lives each and every day. In Germany, we have so-called military experts, such as Florence Gaup, the director of research division at the NATO Defense College in Italy, who have publicly declared very lately that we shouldn't advocate for a ceasefire or for peace negotiations because conflicts have their internal clock. And only when it has run out is a ceasefire possible. Our response to these cynics of power is that, no, this war must end, and it must end immediately. We need an immediate ceasefire without preconditions and a diplomatic solution in Ukraine. And let me say quite clearly that those who want to make this contingent on prior commitments by either of the warring parties just want this war to continue. And this madness must be stopped. And it appears that an agreement was on the table in March 2022. And it's disgrace, that's a disgrace, that the then conservative UK Prime Minister Boris Johnson, in cahoots with the US administration, prevented a deal from being reached. So let's take a close look at what's happening now. The war in Ukraine has turned into a dangerous NATO proxy war against Russia. And this war has the potential to escalate, also thanks to the supply of more and increasingly heavy weapons. Anyone who wants to prevent a nuclear war in Europe must stand up to this escalation. And apparently there's more at stake here, that NATO countries are crossing the line from non-belligerent to belligerent parties in this war. They are doing this in the form of cooperation between intelligence services by advising and coordinating liaison officers on the ground, by exchanging technical and tactical expertise, and by comparing situational pictures to the point of joint situation planning and training Ukrainian soldiers on the use of Western weapons on a massive scale. The recent attacks with British Storm's Shadow missiles represent a fresh escalation in this regard. This spiral of escalation must be stopped. The supplies of weapons to the war zone must be stopped. Brazil, China, and 6 African countries have launched peace initiatives and traveled to Kiev and Moscow. Why isn't this being supported in Washington, in Berlin, in London, or even in Dublin? I often hear people ask what the problem with NATO is, since, or so they argue, it is a purely defense alliance. But anyone who claims that NATO is a purely defense alliance either isn't familiar with the history of the military pact or is knowingly lying to the public. Didn't NATO wage war in Afghanistan for 20 years? Didn't NATO invade Yugoslavia in 1999 without a mandate from the UN Security Council? Didn't NATO wage a murderous war to implement regime change in Libya in 2011 in violation of a UN Security Council resolution? And wasn't it NATO that, despite promises to the contrary, continued to expand further and further east, right up to Russia's border? Wasn't it NATO that, back in 2014, committed itself to a gigantic rearmament program with the 2% target? No, dear friends, NATO is a warfare alliance. Anyone who accedes to its party to murder and manslaughter, as well as the violations of international law, and that's why it should be dissolved, the NATO. And that's why also against the backdrop of its proxy war in Ukraine, I have called Germany's withdrawal from this military pact and for the withdrawal of the US soldiers after 70 years. It's about time that they go home, that they leave the country, and that they take their nuclear weapons with them. And then I've heard the argument that NATO is an alliance of democracies against autocrats. So it's really amazing that no one is remotely ashamed of propagating such high-grade nonsense. This argument is historically false. NATO never had a problem with fascist dictatorships as members, as in the case of Portugal under Salazar, or in the case of Greece following the military coup. And today, it has no problem with the autocrat Erdogan or the fascist Meloni in Italy. But those who enter into pacts with autocrats should please stop claiming that this is a question of democracy and human rights. And when German tanks are rolling into battle against Russia right now, and the German government, in response to my questions, cannot even rule out the possibility of NATO's weapons ending up in the hands of Russian neo-Nazi groups who are now evidently carrying out attacks against Russia with the support of Ukraine, then we must be worried. We have seen with ISIS in Syria what a Frankenstein monster created by the West is capable of doing. This policy is despicable. A few days ago, the European Union adopted its 11th package of sanctions against Russia. This time around, extraterritorial sanctions are set to be imposed on third parties, the first time ever. Brussels is not only at risk of becoming a party to the war itself by providing military aid on a massive scale and training soldiers. By doing this, the European Union is also intensifying its self-destructive economic war. While the Russian economy is growing by 2%, Germany is hurtling into recession, and the European Union will soon follow suit. More and more people can no longer afford the skyrocketing prices on food and energy. The combination of a gigantic rearmament program to the tune of more than 1.1 trillion US dollars by the NATO and the European Union countries this year, from which only the shareholders of the arms industry, of the military industrial complex, and a self-destructive economic war is poison for our societies. And that's why this madness must be stopped too. Dear friends, neutrality is a very precious commodity these days. After all, only those who preserve their neutrality also preserve their democratic sovereignty. A government of the people, by the people. Many countries in the global south are having to witness right now how the NATO countries are unwilling to accept their neutrality, but want to force them, the countries of the global south, to force them to sign up to the economic war and the deliveries of weapons. In a kind of neocolonialism, they want to tell the countries of the global south what to do. The most recent example of this is the right-wing pro-NATO government of Finland, which wants to cut off development assistance to African countries that it considers to be too pro-Russian on the basis of how they cast their votes in the United Nations General Assembly. Ireland has a long history of fighting for independence against colonial oppression, of which everyone here can be justifiably proud. Neutrality is at the heart of its hard-fought independence. To defend neutrality, also in this day and age, is to defend freedom, justice, and democracy itself. You have, my friends, our solidarity in this so very important struggle. Let us stand together against this war and against this escalation, for an immediate ceasefire in Ukraine, for peace negotiations, and let's win the peace and not the war. Thank you.
Now, you have seen the video, you heard it, what was said in that video. I'm not going to go into it because of time, but I mean, you can digest it from yourself, all right? But her last statement, I'm going to pick up from there, right? Now, is the United States and the rest of her ally in Europe going to agree for any peace agreement? Absolutely not. Never. The reason why I said never is because at the end of the day, Europe and America cannot survive without Africa. And they cannot survive within their mind. But we believe America and Europe can survive, even if Africa becomes self-reliant. America has resources, they can use it. But they don't want to. Europe has resources, they can use it and just leave Africa. They can survive. But again, in Europe, in the minds of Europe and Washington, D.C., they can never survive because that's how their economy was built. Europe and America economy, or that's how it was built. It was built on blood. It was built on torture. It was built on humiliation. It was built on killing African. It was built on suffering African. It was built on Africa being, how they call it, in a deplorable condition. It was built on undermining African leaders. It was built on proxy war. So, of course, in their mind, if there is no proxy war, if there is no undermining African democracy and putting in leaders that they want, if it is not, if they cannot exploit the African resources, if they cannot loot the African resources, their economy will fail. Because that's how their economy has been built. That's how America became powerful. That's how Europe became powerful. In their mind, if there is a currency that Africa identifies with and not with the US dollar and not with the European currency, their economy will fail because their economy has survived on the African resources, where African resources have to be sold in American currency or European currency. So in their mind, if Africa have a currency, their economy fail in their mind. Because they do not want to do business with Africa in African currency. They do not want to do business with Africa to buy African resources. They want to come and get African resources for nothing. And then take it to Europe and America. And then lock down Africa. In their mind, if they don't lock down another nation or another continent, their economy will not grow in their mind. And that's how it has been. Their economy have grown because they lock down on all Africans or other nations. They insult other nations. They curse other nations. They call other nations third world. So if those nations can live from the third world stage, their economy will fail in their mind. So they are not ready for peace talk. Because if they go for peace talk, then their mission failed. Then Africa rise. Because their aim here is by all means to defeat Russia. Because if America dare say she's going to fight Africa, then the world will know the intention of America. If Europe dare say she's going to fight Africa because Africans are standing up, Africans are saying no to them, then their intention will be known to the world. So they have to go and fight another nation that Africa is depending on or allying with to become powerful. So if they can defeat that nation, that is how, if you look at history, that's how they were able to conquer the entire African nation, the entire African continent, any nation of Africans. That's how they have been able to defeat. Because once they get the outspoken leader, everybody fall. Like took down Gaddafi, Africa went back another 100 years in time of captivity when they took out Gaddafi. The killing of Gaddafi by Barack Obama and Hillary Clinton in Washington, D.C. and NATO, it took Africa back in 100 years' time. And again, the vision of Gaddafi at that time is died down. When they killed Patrice Lumumba, they took Africa back. And they were happy when they killed Patrice Lumumba. But was it in African people favor? They were happy when they killed Thomas Sankara. Was it in African people favor? They were happy when they killed Steve Biko. Was it in African people favor? They were happy when they put sanctions on Zimbabwe on Robert Mugabe. Was it in African people favor? It was in their favor. So today, if Africa rise, they fail. So they have to fight to defeat Russia. I said it the last time, I'm saying it, now that I'm repeating myself. But if they can defeat Russia, China will not stand alone. Other nations will fall back. Henceforth, when they go to back China, China will be forced to agree. But as it is now, I don't care how their diplomat can run to China to beg China, to apologize to China, for them to keep that mutual friendship, that relationship. It will not be, because China is still holding on to another superpower. And then other nations who also are in a spotlight of superpower, they are also allied. Their aim here is to kill the BRICS nation. And if we can defeat Russia, the BRIC nation will have some kind of a shaking in it. So the point is to take down one superpower. And then if they succeed, then they can go after China and weaken China. And then once that happens, Iran will do nothing. Iran will draw back. The Middle East will draw back. And then Africa becomes vulnerable. Then we become stuck. Nowhere to go. And then America and Europe come with their clauses again, with their ego clause over Africa. That is what I said it last time. We cannot just focus on the BRICS. African nation. Do you see how the European nations, the NATO, along with America, do you see how they are allying, they are coming together, they are discussing, they are funding, they are dialoguing? It's all about Africa. It is time that Africa, the leaders, should get together. I know you guys are doing it. You can do more. You can do better. You can discuss more. You can dialogue better. And you can be swift. Because these people, they are not wasting time, like Nkrumah said. They are never asleep, and we should never be asleep too as well. They are working overtime before September. I don't know how you're going to come to the UN summit in September. I don't know how African leaders are coming. But the last time I said it, all of you shouldn't come to the UN summit. Don't waste your resources. Put ideas together and send 1 or 2 African leaders. That's it. Because if all of you guys come, if all 55 leaders come, all 55 will go with different interests. Despite coming with one voice, all of you will go with different interests. Because you have that soft mind. I don't know how we African, I don't know how we were made by the Creator. We will discuss something of our unity. By the time we meet the oppressor, we change. By the time we meet different people, we change. So you African leaders get together, write what you want to write, and give it to one person. Either give it to Ronald Ruto to come and speak. I know Ronald Ruto will never be bought. I believe, I know it. I know Paul Kagame have turned around. He have realized, even though we have our own issue against him, but this is not the time to prosecute him because he is on the forefront as well. You either give it to Paul Kagame that he come and speak, or you either give it. I know we have our personal issue again as well with the Ugandan president, but he have turned around. He have repented. We can use him. He can come and speak. But all African leaders should not come to that UN summit in September. I'm saying it, and I'm saying it. All of you should not come. Get together on the African continent. Write your memo. Write the speech. Get one voice. Give it to 1 or 2 African leaders, and let 2. That's it. Come. That's it. Only 2 African leaders should come to the UN summit. The rest, we don't need you here. We don't want you here. Do not come here. You got better thing to do on the African continent than all 55 head of state coming here on a nonsense visit to come and meet a nonsense organization that never listened to African people, a racist organization that never listened to African people's interests. Don't come here. We only need 2 leaders. What you got to discuss it and give it to Ronald Ruto or Paul Kagame. One of them, and let them come and speak. Even if you don't want to come, give it to either the Ghanaian parliament, Sam George. Give it to him, let him come and speak. Or you can give it to Julian Malema. He can come. They are all like-minded folks there. Give it to them. You don't have to come here. We don't need you here in the first place. Use the resources that you want to bring here. Use it on the African continent there. Use it in other sectors. Do not use our resources to come here. We are delegates. Don't do it. One leader can come, and the African leader can put 5,000. Instead of it coming with a whole delegate, using 60,000 to 70,000 with all those delegates to come. One nation can use 5,000, contribute 5,000. It becomes 60,000. It becomes 50,000. And those 2 leaders, those 2 presidents or representatives from the African continent can come. Period. That's what we want. Don't come here. All 55 head of state should not come here. All 55 head of state should not come to the September UN summit. Now, you have seen what Germany said about the war in Ukraine. Now the question here, is it lie or is it true that NATO is the one that fought in Russia? Is it lie or is it true that NATO is actually fighting Russia and not Ukraine? Is it true that NATO is using Ukraine as a proxy nation to fight Russia? Is it true? Because a lot of European leaders have come and they said Ukraine is fighting for them. That is a word that you need to look beyond. Ukraine is fighting for Europe. They say Ukraine is fighting for us. What do you mean by Ukraine is fighting for us? Ukraine is fighting for them because if they cannot use Ukraine to defeat Russia, Europe will become a third world country. You heard what the speaker said. Europe is failing. Germany has failed. You heard what the speaker said. Their economy has gone. So the situation in France is not just because of a 17-year-old boy that they shot down. They have shot many people in our France. It's not just because of the 17-year-old. It's because of the economic system. But that 17-year-old boy was just used as an entry point. That is what's going on. So Africa, don't get it twisted. Do not give back the power to America and Europe. Don't do it. Take back your power. It's not going to be easy. It's going to be tough. It's going to be rough. Some people may not even get there. But we got to hold on. We got to keep moving. We got to move on, even if it costs us to walk to the sea, to walk in our sea. Like during the time of slavery. When our brothers and sisters from Nigeria, from that Igbo family, they walked to the sea and they said, it is better to walk into the sea and die than to say it and be treated by another human being who does not have heart, who does not have human being heart, who does not care about another human being. I better die along with my ancestor that died in the sea, that was buried at sea. I better. And they walked into the sea and they died and never came back. We must. We cannot give them, we cannot rescue them. Because if we rescue them, then we cause the problem to ourselves. Like Julia Malema said, we are already there. What are we afraid of? We are there already. We are already dead. What are we afraid of? It is our time. The Chinese was once colonized and racism was once against the Chinese. But do you see racism against Chinese these days? I dare the American justice system to touch Chinese or wrongfully convict Chinese. The Chinese government will come for them because they have a nation. But as it is, black people all around the world does not have a nation to fight for them. We don't. Everybody have a nation that can fight for them, despite being in different continents or different nations. Everyone have a nation except black people, except African people, and that's what Malcolm X said. If Africa rise, black people all around the world will be respected, and you will never touch them. Never. So let's continue from the video. Now, we want to see whether what was said in our video, it is true that NATO is the one fighting Russia, not Russia. We're going to see what Russia want to fight. We're going to see it. Russia does not want to fight. Russia does not need war with anybody. But Russia is fighting. How can you be sitting in your house and somebody come and Buddha you? Maybe it can only happen to Africans, but it can happen to other people. Maybe only African it can happen to where people will just walk and come and bully us in our own terrain. But all people are telling us it can't happen. And they are telling us Africans should wake up. No one own African and the African continent other than African are own African and the African continent. That's what other nations are telling us. America does not own one African, none of the African continent. That's what other nations are telling us. Europe does not own Africans and the African continent. That's what other nations are telling us. They are telling us to wake up. Only African own African, only African own the African continent, not America, to come and tell us what to do, what not to do. Too far, too long. They have gone with it. Let's see the next video here. The war in Ukraine is about Africans. Don't get it twisted. You think they just fighting Russia because they want to fight Russia? Let's see what happened here. This is a Revelation Repatriation Educational Lecture Series. No opinion here. We don't come with opinion. Now, let's see here. Let's see here. If indeed America want peace or Europe want peace. So, if actually it was about feeling sorry for the Ukrainian, why would America don't want peace? If it was really about not to destroy Ukraine, why would America or Europe not want peace? Why would the NATO nation not want peace? When African nations, Brazil or the BRICS are talking about peace, why would America and NATO don't want peace? There when you should ask yourself, why will Putin say he want peace, but America and NATO say no peace? That's the question you should be asking yourself. Now look beyond. Why would they say they don't want peace? What is the reason? It's about Africa, my people. It's about Africa. Now, the title says, NATO Ukraine Council will cease to exist because one of the parties will disappear. Did you get it? One of the party will disappear. Which of the party will disappear? That's Russia. Do these people want peace when they're talking about another person disappearing? Look beyond. This thing is not about Ukraine or Ukraine. It's about Africa. They don't mind if they can destroy certain place or certain people can die. They will honor those people and say those people fight for their right. They will honor them. They will honor those people that will die. And it will be in history forever that they will tell their next generation to come that Ukraine fought. We use Ukraine to defeat Africa. We use Ukraine to fight Russia and defeat Russia because of Africa. So that you could have this power that you have today. But that is not going to happen. Because our forefathers will fight in everywhere. Whether through nature, they will fight. They will fight. Those that die on the sea, they will our rep, they will fight in every possible way that Russia will not be defeated. Because we know with the defeat of Russia, it means the defeat of Africa. That is not to say we support what is going on in Ukraine. Because Africa has called for ceasefire. We don't support it. That's what Africa said we call for ceasefire. Russia don't support it. That's why Russia says she wants peace. So then why were you saying Africa support Russia? War and peace, which one is preferable? Peace, not war. So if we call for peace and you say you don't want peace, you want war, go and fight your war. Well, you will never win a war. Never. We speak it. You will never win a war because we will put our energy to make sure you will never win a war. We will put our energy, our minds and thoughts, our prayer will not go to white Jesus. Our prayer will not go to white Jesus. Our prayer will go in favor of black Jesus. And you will never win a war. Never. Because winning our war, it means defeat to Africa and African people. You will never win our war. Because our forefathers will come from under the grave, under the sea, and they will fight. You will never defeat Russia. You will not win a war. Let's continue here. Now, in 2002, there was a Russia and Ukraine agreement that was made, and NATO broke it. And Russia hold on to this agreement, to this memo. Russia did not want war. NATO-Ukraine Council has been created by way of reminder in 2002. In 2002, and Russia uphold to this agreement in 2002. The NATO-Russia Council was established. How it all ended is well known. Now the alliance in our country are on the brink of war. This time, it is going to end differently. It is going to end differently. The council will cease to exist because one of the parties will disappear. Dmitry Medvedev wrote on Twitter. Now, let's see here. So he's the one. So let's see here what it said here, okay? And then it says, the Deputy Secretary of Russia Powerful Security Council predicted Wednesday that the newly created NATO-Ukraine Council will cease to exist because one of the parties will disappear. Okay, now, so there's the Russian secretary talking, sorry. So he was saying NATO will disappear. So there's not a war that NATO will win. Not NATO, I mean, Ukraine will disappear. Now, the NATO-Ukraine Council has been created by way of reminder in 2002. The NATO-Russia Council was established. The NATO-Russia Council was established. How it all ended is well known. Now the alliance in our country are on the brink of war. This time, it is going to end differently. The council will cease to exist because one of the parties will disappear. The NATO-Russia Council, okay, was established on May 28, 2002 at the NATO-Russia Summit in Rome. That is Italy, I believe. At the time of the conclusion of the agreement. Now, at the time of the conclusion of the agreement, what happened? 8 participants believe that they were putting an end to the Cold War. The last meeting of the NATO-Russia Council was held on January 12, 2022. This was the time If you can remember, when the African leaders met Putin, after they met Zelensky in Kiev, when they met Russia in Moscow. Now, when they met Putin, when Putin pulled out the agreement, the peace agreement, and told the African leaders, this was a peace agreement that was signed and assigned not to have their copy. Ukraine have a copy. I have my copy. This is my copy. Do you remember that time? Now, this was the time they signed a peace agreement. On January 12, 2022 in Brussels, Russia sought security guarantee. They guarantee Russia security that NATO will not interfere into your affair, and NATO will not have base in your backyard. America will not have base in your backyard. Okay? When everything was funded in 2002. Now, Russia sought security guarantee from NATO, but the alliance rejected the request. NATO rejected the request. Washington, D.C. rejected the request from security guarantee. So then, why would you want to blame Russia? Why would you want to blame Russia to say Russia is the problem here? Now, listen to this here. Let's see who is fighting again. Let me see here. Let me see who is fighting here. So, see all the weapons they sent to Ukraine, right? Let's see something here when Putin was speaking. Let me see. If I don't see it, then we will continue because we're running out of time. And we're running out of time, but I'll take it out. But in here, they brought out an article where Russia was speaking. Russia said it is actually the West that is fighting Russia because they are the ones sending ballistic missile, deadly weapon to Ukraine. To Ukraine to fight Russia. And Putin was saying, if they talk about deadliest weapon, we have it. All the weapon that they are sending to Ukraine, we have it. And we even have more than that. But we have never used it. And we have never made an attempt to use it. But they keep provoking us by supplying Ukraine with all their deadliest weapons. And we have never used any deadliest weapon. And even Russia said, one of the weapons that America is sending to Ukraine right now, it is a weapon that after 15, 20 years is still there. After 15, 20 years, it can still blast and it can kill people. And Russia is saying America is supplying Ukraine with these weapons. And America herself has testified to it that they are supplying Ukraine with these weapons. And Russia is saying they have never even used any of those weapons. So these people, they don't want peace. And they will never win their war. Like I said, never will they win this war. We will put our prayer, our energy into them for them not to win. We will call on our ancestors, our forefather. They will never win this war. They will be defeated because they are winning in this war. It means Africa gone by to cost 90, which is 0. Because at this time, we are not yet prepared because the African leaders are not still united. They are still maintaining their colonial nation, their colonial bolos. They are still figuring out what to do. They are not fast. They are working, but they are not fast. They are talking, but they are not making. They are not putting things into action. They are talking, yes, but they are not putting things into action. So until then, we will call on our forefather. We will call on Nkrumah to come. We will call on Patrick Thomas Sankara, Patrick Lumumba. We will call on them to come. We will call on Amika Cabral to come. We will call on Jomo Kenyatta. We will call on those people, Stephen. We will call on them to come. Sekou Touré, all of them, they will come and fight. They will never win out. NATO will not win our war. And the more they spend, the more their economy will plunge. They will not win that war. So you see it, right? So now, you see what is going on here. So it is not Russia. So let's see another statement from Joe Biden himself. Let's see this. Let me take this out. Let's see another statement from Joe Biden himself. Another statement. Another statement. Let's see from Joe Biden himself. Now, why would Joe Biden want to praise the military group that was in Russia fighting? Why would Joe Biden want to praise him? Why would Joe Biden want to give advice to, how they call him, what his name? Let me put it out. I know Prozogin or the Wagner or chief, how they call it, military guy. Why would Joe Biden want to give advice to him? That's the question. Joe Biden is advising. Joe Biden is giving advice to the Russian private military chief of what to do, to be careful of Putin. Why would Joe Biden want to do that? Joe Biden never gave advice to Gaddafi. They went and killed Gaddafi. When Gaddafi was never doing anything against Europe to fight or kill European or kill American. When Gaddafi provided life for his people in Africa and fighting for Africa, they never ever gave Gaddafi advice. They want to kill him. Why would Joe Biden want to get advice to a military group that they themselves, America, was fighting against in Russia? Why would Joe Biden want to give him advice? Joe Biden giving him advice for him to be mindful of Putin, to be careful of Putin before Putin kill him. I thought Joe Biden could be happy for this military, for the chief military guy to die, but Joe Biden is giving an advice to this man for him to be afraid of Putin, to be careful of Putin before Putin kill him. What is going on here? What is going on here? Let me put it out. So, in other words, they are also making form. Washington, D.C., the NATO nation, they are playing form out of Ukraine. They are playing form out of Ukraine. Complete form, complete joke. They are bullying Ukraine. That is not to say I am speaking for Ukraine. I don't care. I speak for Africa and African people. That's the same thing Washington, D.C. and Europe, they are doing on the African continent by telling us they carry African, they carry their military to have fun for African, to die for African. BS. Just how in this video, that lady that spoke for Germany and said it is time for America to take her military from Germany and her nuclear weapon. It is about time you African leaders, you so-called African leaders that accepted those bad deals, especially to have foreign military on the African continent. It is time you tell America to take her nose, her satokas, to take her armies back to America and let her protect America and leave the African continent. Any military group on the African continent that is now fighting in the interest of Africa, you are a terrorist. If you are a military personnel, if you are, and you know what, matter of fact, I already have a topic to speak about next week. Next week, we're going to speak about a topic. America do have a private military. America do have a private military. Just like the Russian private military, America do have a private military. America. Anything America speak against, America is already doing it. Anything she speak against, she is the master. But the reason why she speak against is because America does not know what they call competition. All the colonizer, they cannot compete. The colonizer have never compete. All they do is exercise power. Dehumanize other people. That's how they compete. But on a clean and fair, equal playing place, they can never compete. America, yes, that's the name for it, and we're going to talk about it. Yes, that's the name for it, Black Water. That's America's private military called Black Water. Yes, we're going to speak about it this coming Sunday, in Sunday worship service, like today. We're going to speak about it. That's their name. Lee Selly have changed. Lee Selly have changed it to different names. Oh, yes, that's what they do. But we will find those names. We will find it. We will find it. We will find it. Yes, they do. They do have a private military. They do. And a private military that is there to fight. Because imagine, they still keep the apartheid system in Arena. In Arena, they have their own nation, their own banking system, their own finances or financial system that guard them. Their own governor, their own government, they have it. So part of that private military they have in South Africa is to maintain that apartheid system, is to fight for them, is to fight for the Afro Forum. So yes, America do have a private military just like the Russian private military. Look, anything America speak against, they are already doing it. And we're going to see how America have used our private military around the world to cause chaos. Now, look here. President Biden won the Wrangler chief, Prigozhin, very good. Prigozhin could be poison. Why would President Biden be so concerned? Now, it could be two ways. Don't get it twisted. It could be two ways. Because America is known of poisoning. When it comes to poison, America is good at that. Oh, America tried to do it. They didn't do it. They did it to Nelson Mandela. They poisoned Nelson Mandela, fool Sarah Stan to die, to rot in jail, but he never. They poisoned a toothpaste to kill Patrick Lumumba. They did it to one of the DRC Congo president. I just feel forgetting his name a bit. Seseku Mabutu, yes. They tried to poison him. Now, Judah Magafuli was also poisoned. Judah Magafuli, the Tanzanian president that refused to bow down to coronavirus. And he said coronavirus was man-made. It was deliberately made. And he said he was not going to honor it. They killed him, they poisoned him. He died from poison. So it could be two ways. Either America knows what she's doing, but telling her blunt side to say hey, be careful with Putin. Putin going to poison you. So that if it happened, they will say, but America knew that Putin was going to poison Prigozhin. So it could be both ways. That Biden is advancing this private military group that the same Biden fought against in Ukraine. But again, why will you advance your enemy? I thought you'll be somehow happy or rejoicing for your enemy to die. Why would you want to advance your enemy to live against the same person you are fighting? That could be one. Or it could also be they are the one to poison this man. And then people will say it's Putin that poisoned him. Because when it comes to propaganda, you cannot beat Washington, D.C. Washington, D.C. no propaganda. But the only thing, you have to understand them and expose them. But they are the master of propaganda. They can pretend. But I read here. On Thursday, U.S. President Joe Biden expressed uncertainty about the whereabouts of Prigozhin. Why is Joe Biden concerned about Prigozhin whereabouts? Folks, we spoke 2 or 3 weeks ago about a $3.2 billion that just got missing from the U.S. Treasury. The report they get from the Pentagon. All of a sudden, why would $3.2 billion get missing? And as we all know, this Russian private military group, they are business entity. They go for the higher bait. You remember when Putin said this Russian military group betray Russia, betray us. You remember when Putin said it? Putin said betray. It was not just for nothing. You think these people just walk out of Ukraine for nothing? They went for the higher bait because they are business entity. That's why Putin told them, we want you to be part of the military. We want you to take an oath, because the oath that private military group took is not an oath to protect Russia and Russian citizens. It is an oath that it took to protect their interests in our group and our entity. That's it. So whosoever comes with the higher bait, they go for it. Did America spend money to Prigozhin to withdraw from that war? I don't know. I'm just saying. You be the judge. Pay attention to what is going on. Why would Joe Biden be so concerned about Prigozhin? Debt. Let's continue here. Now, Joe Biden said, let me continue. He said, but let me read the whole thing. On Thursday, President Joe Biden expressed uncertainty about the whereabouts of Prigozhin, but made a remark suggesting that the missionary leader could potentially face the threat of poisoning. What President Joe Biden knows is he knows something he's not telling us. What is he concerned about this man? Why would I want to be concerned about people that somebody that I'm fighting against, that have destroyed my people, that have killed my people, destroyed my country? Why would I want to be concerned about them? Why would I want to give advice? How do President Joe Biden know that Putin, the only means that Putin gets to kill Prigozhin is to poison him? How? How? Now, let's continue here. President Joe Biden said, if I were he, Prigozhin, I would be careful what I eat. Do you see? President Joe Biden is advancing this private military chief. If I were he, I would be careful what I eat or what I eat. I would be keeping my eye on my menu, Biden said in a statement. What is going on here, folks? The $6.2 billion America already spent since last year to 2023. Did they spend some on Prigozhin, the private army? Did they bring this man to leave Russia? To leave Ukraine? Are they on the side of the private military group? Or are they the one to poison this man after they have brought them or they brought this man close to them, and they want to take in that. Oh, that's how America do sometimes. Do you watch the CIA? When they send the CIA for special, look, when you join the CIA, it's like you put your entire family life in jeopardy, because they can send you for some kind of special mission. And if you accomplish that mission, you come back. Don't come to America. Because if you come here, they will kill you. You will disappear. You will lost. So some people, when they're going on an intensive mission, they tell their wife, their family to leave America, to go to a different country and change their name. And right after they leave that special operation mission, they don't come back to America. They go to where their family is. Because they feel that they have to take down those people, because that mission, it was not a mission to keep those people alive. They would leak the secret out. So could it be that they bought this man and they trying to kill him? They trying to poison him. Then they said about it that Putin, could it be a message that they're putting out here to turn the attention away from people? I don't know. Let's continue here. I'm just reading here. Don't come for me. Don't come for my channel. I'm just reading. Because that's how you neo-colonialists, imperialists, that's how you do. When people speak, then you come for them. When they put you outside, you come for them. So I'm just saying, you spoke it. I'm just reading. Now, U.S. President Joe Biden on Thursday said the United States was on show where Prigozhin was. Why is the United States so worried, or like not worried, but why are they like, I don't know. I don't even know what kind of word to describe. But quip that the missionary chief could be poisoned. Look, these people know something. What went on in Ukraine? Billions of dollars was spent on that private military. That private military was bought. The same way Gaddafi had a nuclear weapon, America lied to them. And they take over the nuclear weapon and when they killed Gaddafi. Oh, Iran too did the same thing. Iran had a nuclear weapon and when they talk to Iran. Iran get a nuclear weapon, boom! They went against Iran. That's how the imperialists do it. You don't trust them. Their agenda will always be the same. But they may be sophisticated. They come with different ideas. But let's continue here. Now, I'm going to read the same thing, but I'm going to take it out. President Joe Biden said, if I were he, I will be careful what I eat. I will be keeping my eyes on my menu. Biden said, according to White House transcript. Then Biden went as far as saying, but all kidding aside, now this is Joe Biden. He is very serious. Telling people, I'm telling you, look, I'm not kidding. I'm being serious here. All kidding aside, 1-to-1, who knows? President Biden is already confessing. They are the one that making this plan. But they're taking away the attention of people. But I'm not kidding. Put all things aside, 1-on-1. Who know? I don't know. I don't think any of us know for sure what the future for Prigozhin is. That's Joe Biden. Once a colonizer will always be a colonizer. So you see what's going on here, right? Why Washington, D.C. should be concerned. Washington, D.C. were never concerned about Dr. King when Dr. King was not doing anything wrong, but they said he was a tolerant. They never advised Dr. King. They killed him. Why would they be concerned about somebody? Come on, man, folks. Why would they be concerned about this man? Why would Joe Biden get advice to this man? So do you see here? Exactly, Lee. It sounds like a threat. Are they the one to do it? Are they the one planning to do it? Because Joe Biden is setting. Are they the one planning to do it? Do you see it? Right? Now, let's go to the video. One more video, then we'll be done with this. With the whole Ukraine stuff. Let's go to the NATO summit and see what we're talking about. These people are not, they're not looking for peace. They are not looking for peace. So let's see here. Let's see here, okay? We're almost done.
Leaders reconfirmed the EU's readiness to provide sustainable military support to Ukraine for as long as it takes, and condemned the deliberate destruction of the dam at the Kakhovka.
Now you see it, NATO, EU, they say as long as it takes, they're going to keep giving military support to Ukraine. As long as it takes, NATO going to fight Russia. No peace talk here. No peace agreement here.
Kakhovka hydroelectric power plant, which puts at risk the safety and security of Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant.
We have to make Ukraine able to defend. So the European Peace Facility for Ukraine, maybe it has to become an Ukrainian defense fund. The training has to continue. The modernization of the army has to continue.
The European Union and its member states will intensify international support for the key principles and objectives of Ukrainian's peace formula, including through an upcoming global peace summit.
So now it's the time to really double down on our support for Ukraine. And this was discussed today in many different topics. For example, on the military side, under your presidency, the member states agreed to use 2 billion euros from the European Peace Facility to procure ammunition for Ukraine. We have already delivered over 220,000 ammunition rounds and over 2,000 missiles. And we are now well on track to deliver the 1 million rounds, which are foreseen within the next 12 months.
European leaders condemn.
Okay, so you see the energy, you see the weapon, okay? You see the finances, the support they are giving to Ukraine. So you see who is fighting. So again, let's go to African leaders. Do you see the amount of support, weapon they are giving to Ukraine to fight the enemies? Let's just say Russia is the enemy. But do they give the support to African leaders for them to fight the jihadi or the terrorists, or for them to fight the enemies? They don't do it. But they come to us with their lies of globalism, of helping African, of working with African, of doing business together, of doing that here and that nonsense. The amount of support that they have given to Ukraine, I dare them to give that support to African. Terrorists will be dead and erased from the African continent. But it is the flip side. You heard President Joe Biden what he said. If Africa become free from war, let's just put it that way. Africa become free from proxy war, free from terrorists, free from Western support of destabilization. The reverse. America will be third world country. The reverse. Europe will be third world country. That will be the reverse. We will suffer. We will die in poverty. They will call America a poverty nation, a third world nation. That's what Joe Biden was talking about. If we don't find a strategy to find an industrial policy, the reverse. If we don't work on time, over time, the reverse. Let's continue here.
And the continued military support for Russia's war of aggression provided by Iran and Belarus, and were concerned by the continued slowdown in the implementation of the Black Sea Grain Initiative.
The most important thing and the most immediate and urgent task is to support Ukraine, to ensure that Ukraine prevails as a sovereign, independent nation in Europe.
President of Ukraine Volodymyr Zelensky had a speech on the first day of the summit.
Dear colleagues, partners, I'm grateful to all of you who's helping our defense against Russian aggression. Thank you for every air defense system provided to us. They do save lives, it's truth. And thank you for the European initiative on 1 million shells and rounds for Ukraine, for our tank coalition, and for all the defense packages that have been provided to our country. This is truly historic cooperation for the defense of Europe. Ukraine is grateful to Lithuania and Poland, and we will not allow Russia or its terrorist groups to even try to undermine the security of the Lithuanian and Polish people from the territory of Belarus. For Ukraine, the security of our partners is also our security.
The attempt of the military coup was one of the main topics for participants.
Everything remains unclear what has happened, who were behind this attempt of military upheaval or military rebellion.
Russia is unstable, unpredictable, and dangerous. Was yesterday and is the same right now.
European leaders were shocked with the collapse of Russian authority, which could not prevent the action of Wagner Group.
It seems that Putin is not the only master in town, and that he has lost what Machiavelli said it's the basis of the state, which is the monopoly of force.
In contrast with the very strong EU unity and NATO EU unity. This is a very important point.
The support for Ukraine may ensure stability at the eastern border of the European Union in case of public disorders or another coup in Russia.
To be honest, we have no interest in a destabilized Russia, and I have really clearly taken distance from Putin's words, saying that it was in our interest that there was mayhem and discourse and chaos in Russia. It is not.
We should also keep in mind that the erosion of Wagner will not only play a role in Ukraine, but will also play a role in Africa, because Putin has projected his power through Wagner in Africa, and here too we will certainly see the effects of the erosion.
Again, at the end of the day, you see how it gone back to Africa. Putin has extended, let me just use paraphrasing. Putin has extended his power in Africa. Look, there's no way these people will do discussion and they will never narrow it down to Africa. It's all about Africa. Now, I think 2 weeks ago, we gave a report on it. Who military in Africa supporting a terrorist? Who military did the Chadian army catch supplying or carrying weapons in Sudan? The Chadian army caught the French soldier transporting weapons to Sudan. So who are the people in Africa creating the problem? Is it Russian military? Or the Russian military are in Africa helping Africans to fight the jihadi or to fight the terrorists? It is Russia that is giving helicopter to African leaders, African military to fight the terrorists. Why America military are there with their weapons, with their helicopter, while the French military are there with their weapons, with their helicopter, and then the worst part, transporting it to a war zone for them to kill Africans, for them to destroy Africa. Who is exercising power? Who is the one having problem on the African continent? The people that are helping Africans to fight the enemies? Look, Africans leader, do you see how this leader in our house, there was no one African representation? Do you see how the European, how the West, the NATO nation, do you see how swiftly they are discussing, they are putting things together? Look, by the time you come for the UN summit in September, these people agenda will already be set and complete. Look, African leader, don't waste your time coming for that UN summit, because there is nothing you guys will say that the West will agree. Look, the meeting that they are having is all about them right now. They don't care what you coming to say. Do not come, African leaders. Do not come for the UN summit. All of you, one or two that's set. Go and have your continental meeting and come out with your continental agenda. Come out with your continental interests. Take one or two leaders, period, to come to Washington, D.C. or to come to New York in our UN summit. And let that African leader, one person, read and speak and sit. That's it. And go back to Africa and go and have your African summit and discuss what's best for Africa. These people are discussing what's best for them. Do you see the amount of support they are giving to Ukraine? That's the point here. And then they talk about Wagner Group, Russia using Wagner Group all on Africa. America has used her military all into the African nations. What are they doing? What benefit are they giving? At least we can say, if you ask the Malian will tell you what Russia have done for them. At least if you ask the Malian, they will tell you the Wagner Group what they have done for them. At least. But if you ask the African on the African continent, not one African will tell you the African on the African continent are fighting the jihadi or the terrorists. Never. Not one African will tell you the French army in Africa are helping to fight to alongside with Africa to fight the terrorists. You will not see it. You will not hear it. So any military on the African continent, what are African? As long as you are not helping Africa, you are a terrorist. Any foreign military on the African continent, as long as you are not fighting in the interest of Africa, you are a terrorist. You should leave. Africa is a terrorist. French army on the African continent, they are terrorists. They should leave. German military on the African continent, they are terrorists. Portuguese, Spanish, they are terrorists. They should leave. All right, folks, that's the end. But I want to end here with one video and then we go. I love that video so much from Sam George, the Ghanaian parliament, of their stand. The measures, his courage is what I love. Because I love it. When we stand, I love it, African leaders. I love it. I love it. And I'm going to play it. And video like this should be played everywhere. I love the courage. So let me end with that and then we go.
Sam George has came out speaking about what the United States and other Western powers have been threatening to Ghana, because Ghana is trying to follow suit to creating a law maybe similar to Uganda's LGBTQ law. And Sam George isn't having it with the potential threats against other lawmakers if they pass the particular bill that they're trying to craft in their country. Let's go ahead and roll that clip.
Because, Mr. Speaker, like it is attributed to Robert Mugabe, if we put two men in a room and give them 12 months to produce as an offspring, they cannot produce an offspring. And so, Mr. Speaker, we will continue to stand here. But let me use this opportunity, Mr. Speaker, to celebrate Mr. Speaker, who has been a stalwart and a bastion for this bill. But for Mr. Speaker, this bill would most likely have been killed. Mr. Speaker has stood his ground and ensured that this bill has come this far. And I want to use this opportunity with the support of my colleague members of parliament, since we all support this bill, to serve notice to the Western powers that we have taken judicial notice of what they have done to the Speaker of Uganda. After Uganda passed the bill, the sanctions on the Speaker of Uganda's parliament and on the sponsors of those bills, we will serve notice as well that if they replicate same with our Speaker and members of parliament, we will also take action against their business interests in our country, because they serve in this country and make money from here and take back home. They cannot hold us to ransom. And like has been asked on this floor, Mr. Speaker, why is it that the American Secretary of State has not sanctioned the Secretary of Defense? Because June was declared Pride Month and they had transgender parades. The US Secretary of Defense blocked and stopped a transgender parade on a US Air Force base because he said the US Pentagon, which is their defense headquarters, would not support such activity. Governor DeSantis has passed legislation against open transgender parades in Florida. Why have they not taken on their own citizens? In fact, in 2022 alone, there were 433 actions in State House of Legislatures across the United States, banning and clamping down on homosexuality. The Supreme Court of the United States, SCOTUS, just last week, passed a landmark judgment enforcing the rights of American citizens to refuse to offer services to people on the basis of their faith and because they were LGBTQ. Mr. Speaker, it shows you that even America has realized the error of their judgment and are walking back their steps. Italy in June designated June also as Family Protection Month to counter the Pride Month. Maybe that's something Ghana should begin to consider, that we make June a family values month to celebrate the Ghanaian family value.
We are aware of the attacks and the threats that have been made, but like we serve notice, we're a sovereign nation and we will stand for what is Ghanaian. And we also want to serve notice to those issuing the threats that carrying out those threats will be a high-risk enterprise here in Ghana, because we will come on the floor of Parliament, use your platforms as media houses because we know you support this bill, and publicize every business that is from that country in this country that operates in Ghana and call on Ghanaians to boycott them. So if any government of any country thinks that they will sanction any of the sponsors of the bill or the Speaker of Parliament after this bill is passed, they should prepare to pack up and leave our country as well, because we would also instigate public outcry against their business interests in our country. If they work here, they must respect our laws, because when we visit their countries, we respect their laws. And until we see them carry out those threats against the likes of Saudi Arabia, Qatar, Ukraine, or Russia, Bahrain, Kuwait, the United Arab Emirates, Russia and China, then they should stay off Ghana. We are committed to ensure that under the guidance of Right Honorable Speaker, we would go into the consideration. We expect the consideration stage to be a very swift one, because even though there are a number of amendments, those amendments are largely a product of agreement between the sponsors and the committee. And so there would be hardly any cantankerous debates on the subject of those amendments.
Now, I will say this, Ghana, in my opinion, that brother need to be your next president. That brother right there. I like that brother. That brother is outspoken. The brother called out the Western powers. He let them know, you're not going to come in here just doing what you want to do. Oh, no. He said, we are our own country. We are a sovereign nation. And you heard what he said. He said, look, if you going to go it on and sanction all of us, we're going to just boycott your businesses and mess up your money in here.
And I want to use this opportunity with the support of my colleague members of parliament, since we all support this bill, to serve notice to the Western powers that we have taken judicial notice of what they have done to the Speaker of Uganda. After Uganda passed the bill, the sanctions on the Speaker of Uganda's parliament and on the sponsors of those bills, we will serve notice as well that if they replicate same with our Speaker and members of parliament, we will also take action against their business interests in our country, because they serve in this country and make money from here and take back home. They cannot hold us to ransom.
And I say, right on, brother, right on. I'm starting to love that a lot of leaders in the African continent are starting to stand up to the Western world. You know, you got your brother Sam here, Sam George. You have President Museveni. You have President Kagame in Rwanda. You have President Ruto in Kenya. You have a whole lot, other MPs that's in Kenya as well, that's come out saying things. Like they not liking this, okay? I'm gonna tell you why the Western world's not liking this. The Western world's not liking this because they're trying to do everything they can to slow down population growth in the African continent. That's why. And the only way they can slow it down is bringing in, ways for them not to have children. And the ultimate way for you not to have children is if you are in a relationship, if you're a man relationship with a man, a woman relationship with a woman. That's the ultimate way for you not to have children. But on the African continent, that's not their culture. That's not conducive for them. That's pretty big in the Western world. That's more so a European culture, because you research their history, they've been practicing that for a very, 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 very long time. That's more so their culture. Now, because we live in the Western world, their culture rubs off on us. But if you go to the African continent, that's far and few in between. What I love about the African continent, they promote traditional families. And you heard what this brother said. We need to have Family Month, promoting the traditional family. And I will say to my brothers and sisters on the African continent,
Dialpad's AI sales has completely transformed how we sell. AI is built right in with life coaching,
continent, protect your family at all costs. Protect your culture at all costs. Do not let the Western world and their perversions come into the African continent and change your people. If you need to cut off certain Western movies, Western television, cut that out of your country, because you don't need the influence. All the housewives shows, you don't need that kind of influence. All the different degenerate things that go on, you don't need the influence, because you have impressionable young people that's on the internet and seeing certain things. Oman, Jordan, Kuwait, all the Arab nations who has those same laws. If they're not pushing sanctions on them, well, then they can't be pushing it on the Africans. So if they sanction the Africans and not the Arabs, it lets you know it's nothing but some racism. And Africans need to understand that on the continent. When we talk about racism, white supremacy, and it's a global system, this is exactly what we're talking about, and this is what they're trying to push in your country. They want to sanction you, but not sanction Saudi Arabia. They're not defending LGBT rights, because Saudi Arabia would have been, and the rest of them would have been sanctioned a long time ago. And they're not doing it. In these Arab countries, if you're LGBT, you can lose your life. So they're not defending LGBT rights. They're using LGBT to try to harm black nations. And that's wrong. You don't use LGBT for that. But let me know what y'all think about, you know, our brother Sam George, you know, any Ghanaians.
All right, folks. That's why we stop today. That's today's presentation. Yeah, exactly. America has military agreement with Ghana. America uses Ghana to transport its military equipment to Niger Republic. Ghana is fully now under the control of America after taking off loans by Ghana. Yes, exactly. And that's what happened. And that's why, by the way, I'm going to replay the video and I'll just let it play. But the show going to end, but I'll just let it play for those who came late. That is what's going on. So what happened? Like the first video we watched, right? And which I'm going to play. I'm going to replay it. It says during the time of slavery, white folks did have sexual intercourse with African women, but it was not because of romance. It was not because of love. Okay, it was not because those African women wanted love from the so-called white men or from the so-called white master. It was not because those African women wanted love. They didn't want it. Okay, but they were forced. Those white guys, they have romantic relationship with the African women. In fact, they have most of the slave have African women in their home. So some of the slave master in totality, they never had plantation. Some of the slave master had African women in their homes, and they were using it to breed with these African women, have sex with these African women, pregnant them, get them impregnated, right? And then when they get birth, they take that baby and sell the baby. So that's how they were making money. So not all slave masters have plantation. Some of them have African women using it as sex farm. So they have sex farm. Okay? So when they bombard these women and they take the baby and go and sell the baby because the baby coming black. If the baby come white, they will have that sympathy. But the baby, other way, the baby going to come black. So once the baby come black and they see black, they will have no remorse to say that's my sperm, that's my offspring. Because at the end of the day, the baby come all black, so they don't care. So they will take the baby and then go sell the baby to another plantation holder, to a plantation owner. So that's how they make money during that time. So not all how they call it, slave master have plantation. Some of the slave master, they only have African women. Not all the slave master have men. All of them have, most of them have women. African women that they were just how they call it, getting them pregnant. And then when these people get birth, it's like chicken. It's like cattle. They have these people, you know, just to get baby, to get birth. And then after birth, they take the baby and go and sell the baby. That's how they were making money. So they had sex farm. So when you hear sex farm, it was not plantation. Sex farm were where these white people have a lot of African, like 200, 300, and they were just having sex by them and just getting pregnant and then born and giving baby and then selling the babies. And then when the women when the African mother reach to maybe 35 or in her age, then they go and sell. They go and sell that woman to a plantation owner now. Then that woman will go and live the rest of her life on a plantation. Because at 35, the woman is still, you know, strong to work. African women. So now they will take that woman and actually sell that woman to a plantation owner. And then now that woman will go and work to the plantation. But from the age of, let's say, 18 all the way to 35, most slave master, they never have plantation. They only have slave women where they were having sex with them. You see it? So, yes, that in line with the military in Ghana, that's what they are there for. They are not there to go and help fight or jihadi or military to fight for African. That's not what they are there for. You see it? So they have their mission and they are there supporting terrorists. Okay, in Niger, Chad, Mali, Burkina Faso. Okay, that's what they are there for. To create chaos, to create instability. Okay? Proxy war, destabilization. That's what they are there for. They are the people that created terrorists on the African continent. That's what they are there for. You see? But let me play this video and then we leave. I'm not gonna, the video is just gonna play, but we end here for today. For those of you that want to leave, you can leave. But those of you that came late, that want to watch a video, I'm gonna replay it and it's just gonna play. But other than that, I will see you all Saturday and also Sunday. So Sunday, we're going to talk about the American private military that Lee also brought, the how they call it, the Blackwater. Yeah, we're going to talk about them, and you're going to see their role, the role America have played, just like the Russian private military. In fact, the Russian private military is much better, okay? Because you pay them, they go and help fight the jihadi or the terrorists. But unlike the American private military, the Blackwater, I don't even know why they name it black. Because anything that is bad, they name it black. Okay? And you're going to see what they have done. So I don't know if war crime court should go against America. I don't know. They always talk about people to go to the RCC. But all the heinous crime they committed, they never talk about America going to the RCC.
With them, granting them a respite from the brutish black slaves they would otherwise be subjected to. Generally speaking, it was the house slaves that got raped the most.
Please do us a favor by sharing this video.
Nobody talks about the 13-year-old girl on a breeding farm, forced to bear as many children as possible, only to have them ripped away and sent down south to endure a lifetime of hardship without a mother. Slave owners often bred their slaves to produce more workers. The function of such breeding farms was to produce as many slaves as possible for the sale and distribution throughout the South. In this video, we discuss the sad truth about American slave breeding farms. By the 1820s, planters and would-be planters were moving in large numbers to places previously unavailable for settlement, and growing the fiber for sale in Europe and New England, where a textile industry was beginning to thrive. The extension of the so-called Cotton Kingdom required new laborers. As of 1808, when Congress ended the nation's participation in the international slave trade, planters could no longer import additional slaves from Africa or the West Indies. The only practical way of increasing the number of slave laborers was through new births. With so much at stake, black women's reproductive role became politically, as well as economically, decisive. If enslaved mothers did not bear sufficient numbers of children to take the place of aged and dying workers, the South could not continue as a slave society. From many trusted history sources, it's made to appear that America had little choice but to increase slave production to offset the altruistic end of the international slave trade, which Congress banned in 1808. Thomas Jefferson was president at the time. He had no problem with slavery. He literally loved his slaves, failing to free even Sally Hemings, who bore him 6 children, 4 of whom lived to be adults. Jefferson was a Virginia farmer, knowing full well the value of slavery to the Southern economy. Congress at that time was controlled by the party he created, the Democratic Republican Party. They didn't end the international slave trade to harm slavery, but to preserve it, domestic slavery, in particular. Congress wanted to decrease the external supply to keep prices up for the homebred slaves. Americans did not take up breeding slaves in response to congressional action. That action was taken at the behest of slave breeders as a protectionist means to keep the price of their product up. Jefferson's home state Virginia was the leading producer of slaves. Slavery eventually exceeded tobacco as their leading export. Maryland was second in slave production, followed by several other states. Economist Richard Such did a study which found that in 1860, on farms with at least one female slave, the ratio of women to men was 2 to 1. In Virginia, female slaves exceeded males by over 300,000. They were used to breed. Robert Lumpkin ran what is mostly referred to as a slave jail, with little recognition that he ran the nation's largest breeding farm. He personally had 5 children with a slave Mary, who he ultimately remembered in his will. While owners of the breeding farms and plantations, in general, fornicated at will with their property, they also utilized selective breeding, maintaining their own large bucks and importing large male slaves for the purpose of breeding good workers for the fields. Black female slaves were some of the first people in the country to receive free health care. Breeders took a great interest in fertility and expected multiple births from the women, or their value would be diminished. Home medical journals were produced to help with difficult births that had previously been left to the slaves to deal with. Many films have depicted boats arriving in New Orleans, which became the largest slave market in the antebellum South. Rarely is it shown those ships originated in Richmond and Baltimore. Slaves were also shipped by railroad, packed in boxcars, or sent by stagecoach. The slave breeding farms are mostly left out of the history books except for those that deny their existence. Many of the white slave owners felt they were doing their female slaves a favor when they mated with them, granting them a respite from the brutish black slaves they would otherwise be subjected to. Generally speaking, it was the house slaves that got raped the most. Some mothers had to protect their offspring from the master's wife if she had reason to believe her spouse was the father. States such as Virginia produced slaves as their main domestic crop. The price of slaves was anchored by industry in other states that consumed slaves in the production of rice and sugar, and constant territorial expansion. As long as the slave power continued to grow, breeders could literally bank on future demand and increasing prices. That made slaves not just a commodity, but the closest thing to money that white breeders had. It's hard to quantify just how valuable people were as commodities, but the sublets try to convey it. By a conservative estimate, in 1860 the total value of American slaves was $4 billion, far more than the gold and silver then circulating nationally. Slaves were worth more than everything else they could imagine combined. Because slaves were property, Southern slave owners could mortgage them to banks, and then the banks could package the mortgages into bonds, and sell the bonds to anyone anywhere in the world, even where slavery was illegal. In the 1830s, powerful Southern slave owners wanted to import capital into their states so they could buy more slaves. They came up with a new, two-part idea, mortgaging slaves, and then turning the mortgages into bonds that could be marketed all over the world. First, American planters organized new banks, usually in new states like Mississippi and Louisiana. Drawing up lists of slaves for collateral, the planters then mortgaged them to the banks they had created, enabling themselves to buy additional slaves to expand cotton production. To provide capital for those loans, the banks sold bonds to investors from around the globe: London, New York, Amsterdam, Paris. The bond buyers, many of whom lived in countries where slavery was illegal, didn't own individual slaves. Bonds backed by their value. Planters' mortgage payments paid the interest and the principal on these bond payments. As historian Edward Baptist reveals, slavery and its expansion were central to the evolution and modernization of the United States in the 18th and 19th centuries, catapulting the US into a modern, industrial, and capitalist economy. In the span of a single lifetime, the South grew from a narrow coastal strip of worn-out tobacco plantations to a subcontinental cotton empire. By 1861 it had 5 times as many slaves as it had during the Revolution, and was producing 2 billion pounds of cotton a year. It was through slavery and slavery alone that the United States achieved a virtual monopoly on the production of cotton, the key raw material of the Industrial Revolution, and was transformed into a global power rivaled only by England. Several factors coalesced to make the breeding of slaves a common practice by the end of the 18th century, chief among them the enactment of laws and practices that transformed the view of slaves from personhood into thinghood. In this way, slaves could be bought and sold as chattel without presenting a challenge to the religious beliefs and social mores of the society at large. All rights were to the owner of the slave, with the slave having no rights of self-determination either to his or her own person, spouse, or children. Slaveholders began to think that slavery was grounded in the Bible. This view was inspired in part by an interpretation of the Genesis passage, and he said, "Cursed be Canaan, a servant of servants shall he be unto his brethren." Ham, son of Noah and father of Canaan, was deemed the antediluvian progenitor of the African people. Some whites used the Bible to justify the economic use of slave labor. The subjugation of slaves was taken as a natural right of the white slave owners. The second-class position of the slave was not limited to his relationship with the slave master, but was to be in relation to all whites. Slaves were considered subject to white persons. America scarcely acknowledges the existence of breeding farms, let alone documents their contribution to the early South's flourishing economy. There are self-evident truths described in the Declaration of Independence, and truths so vile that they must be concealed and ignored at all costs. The second group includes breeding farms. History books, when they mention it at all, claim that slave breeding did not begin until after the Atlantic slave trade was prohibited. In reality, it began decades earlier on plantations and farms, and it was only because America was able to produce the slaves it required that the importation of slaves from Africa was stopped.
Good afternoon.